This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. April 1st will be a busy day on our Manhattan campus. In addition to K-State's open house taking place, the university will also be hosting the 93rd Little American Royal. K-State undergraduate students Sarah Jordan and Sydney Napolillo share their experiences in helping make this year's showmanship competition possible. K-State Beef Reproductive Specialist Sandy Johnson also joins us today to discuss preparing for artificial insemination this season. She provides tips on checking equipment, providing good nutrition to cows and heifers, and making sure you have the best plan in place for your operation. To be effective, crabgrass preventers must be applied before germination. K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Riley County, Gregg Eyestone, ends today's show by explaining that the timing of the application is important. That and more's coming up ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Ag Today intern Katie Figge. And today I have two students in the studio with me to talk about the upcoming event, the Little American Royal. And so today I have Sarah Jordan, who is a junior studying agricultural education. Thanks for joining us today, Sarah.
Thanks, Katie.
I also have Sydney Napolillo, who is a junior studying animal science. Thanks for joining us, Sydney.
Thank you, Katie.
So, to get started, what is the Little American Royal?
So the Little American Royal is a contest hosted by the Block and Bridle Club and the Dairy Science Club that allows College of Ag students to be able to break an animal to lead from one of our units across campus, and then they exhibit that animal in a showmanship contest at Weber Arena. And this year, the contest is April 1st, which is also open house day, and the show starts at 12.
Yeah, so we have over 100 exhibitors across 6 species showing in 2 different classes, in advanced and novice.
Awesome. So will you two be participating as well, or could you tell us a little bit about your roles within the event?
So Sydney and myself are, with Ashley Hartman, are the dairy chairman. So we've been working with the students who are exhibiting dairy cattle on helping them break the animals to lead up at the unit. And then we'll be there show day, helping them get in the ring and everything. Last year, I competed as an exhibitor in the advanced competition, and I really enjoyed that experience. So I'm really excited to be able to help others this year.
Why did each of you choose to get involved in this event?
Yeah, so I'm the treasurer of the Dairy Science Club, and the Dairy Science Club is one of the clubs that is a part of putting this on, so it's kind of my responsibility as treasurer to be a part of the Little American Royal.
I'm also in the Dairy Science Club, and I was asked by Sydney and Alicia Bourne, who's the president of the Dairy Science Club, just because of my experience with dairy cattle showing and honestly my passion for it. They asked me to be involved, and I'm really excited that I was able to help out.
So how can students get involved, and what do their tasks look like within this event?
So this event is open to any College of Ag students, and for a lot of classes, they offer it as an extra credit experience to give students that further learning with a more hands-on experience. So we have a lot of students, especially in the dairy category. We have about 43 students, and that's because it's a further extension of their ASI 106 dairy science class.
So with those students getting involved and with you guys being involved as the chairs, what does that timeline kind of look like? How much work and time have you put into this already before the event started?
Yeah, so we've been out at the dairy pretty much every day for the past 2 weeks. We had 1 week over spring break where we had no practices, but me, Sarah Jordan, and Ashley Hartman have been out there for at least 2 hours every single day helping the kids with showmanship practices and halter breaking.
So you guys said you're the chairmans within this, but are there other chairmans for the other species as well, and how many species are there?
Yeah, so there's 6 species: beef, horse, dairy, goat, sheep, and swine. I believe there's at least 2 chairs for each species.
So what is each of your favorite parts of this event?
I would say for me, I'm really excited to see the kids who maybe came in with no show experience, no handling experience, and be able to walk in the ring and feel confident and just really see the improvement that they've made.
I'm just excited to work with the exhibitors. It's been a lot of fun teaching everyone how to show and be a part of this experience.
Yeah, Sydney, when you say teaching them how to show, walk me through the basics of what that kind of looks like when you're working with the students.
Yeah, so I've been kind of learning how to show myself. I've never actually shown a dairy cattle before either. But Sarah Jordan and Ashley Hartman, they've been helping me and the other exhibitors a lot. So we started off with just halter breaking on a rope halter, and then we moved to show haltering this past Saturday. And we've just been teaching them the basics of how to show in a ring with a judge.
So, Sarah, your experience working with students in this event, has that been a positive experience, and what do you think that's like, and how do you think that could benefit you in your future career in ag education?
Yeah, so I really have loved, with my experience in dairy cattle showing and just my love for teaching others, I thought it's been really fun. I mean, when you're working with students, especially if some of them are some of your age, it's hard sometimes to be able to teach them, have maybe that authoritative figure. But I've definitely learned a lot being able to work with them, and this will definitely help me in my career because we kind of doing the same sort of thing with my ag students when I'm a teacher. So I've really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, and Sarah, you said that you've been a member of this in the past, and so you've been able to show. What has been your favorite memory of that?
I would say for me, so I showed last year, and prior to that, I hadn't shown a dairy cattle in 2 years because of COVID. The show season was cut short for me, so it was really fun to be able to get back into it, be able to break the calf to lead, and then just be able to show in Weber Arena. It was really fun to it's like that muscle memory that you never really lose, but it was really fun to get back into it. So I really enjoyed that, and I think a lot of the students are enjoying the experience because maybe they never had it before. So.
Yeah, and Sydney, have you had any show experience in the past where you kind of feel like getting to be a part of this event kind of helps you bring that nostalgia back, or is this kind of your first experience jumping into the show industry, if you will?
Yeah, no, so I showed in high school. Never dairy go. I was always a goat girl, and I did rabbits too. So this is a new fun experience to show cattle.
Awesome. It kind of brings that nostalgia back for me as well, being part of it, as I used to show cattle too. Taking part in this event and hearing about how much you guys love it, why would you recommend other students to do it in the future?
Yeah, so I think even if you've never shown any species before, and having this experience is really unique and special, and this is kind of like once in a lifetime thing. Like, when are you ever going to get another chance to show a species that you're not normally used to, especially if you're not necessarily in the animal science major or anything?
So the event is this Saturday on April 1st, but can you kind of run us through the show day schedule so that the public kind of knows when to come and watch?
Yeah, so we plan to start at 12 o'clock, and that will begin with a couple of awards, the national anthem, and then we plan to start the horse show at 12:15, and then after that, there'll be 3 rings, and in ring 1, we'll have the dairy and beef show, and then ring 2 will be in addition to the dairy show, and then the goat and sheep show, and then ring 3 will be in the swine show. We are hoping to have the event done by about 3 o'clock, but you never really know with shows how long that they're going to go.
Awesome. And then do you know who those judges are going to be on Saturday?
We have 2 judges for the dairy show. They're a sibling pair, but I believe all the judges for across all species are from outside of K-State.
Awesome. So where can listeners, if this has really piqued their interest today, where can they go to find more information about the event?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook page, Kansas State University Little American Royal.
Awesome. And as always, listeners, we'll link that information in the show notes of today's program. But thank you, ladies, for joining us today. This has been a really fun topic to cover.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.
Once again, that was Sarah Jordan, who is a junior studying agricultural education, and Sydney Napolillo, who is a junior studying animal science.
Thanks so much, Katie, for that insight on the upcoming Little American Royal taking place this weekend in Manhattan. Before we cut to a short break, a quick word from Rod Bain with the USDA. He shares information on the announcement of clear definitions of products of U.S. labels for meat, poultry, and egg products. These definitions are the latest in a series of attempts to create and define such a labeling class.
A proposed rule in the Federal Register is taking public comment on clarification to the Product of USA label for meat, poultry, and egg products. Product of USA is one of several labels used in part to differentiate and market product by the federal government. You perhaps have heard of Made in the USA for various goods, or Country of Origin labeling. COOL is mandatory for products ranging from lamb meat and chicken to some tree nuts and perishable commodities. It was, until 2015, mandatory for beef and pork.
WTO has confirmed that we have, in essence, the right to provide county of origin requirements, but they basically confirmed a previous ruling that the requirements as written in the statute are not consistent with WTO obligations.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack from that year, when the final appeal of a 2012 World Trade Organization ruling was denied. The initial ruling favored Canada and Mexico's challenge of U.S. mandatory country of origin labeling for muscle cuts of beef and pork. The threat of retaliatory sanctions by Canada and Mexico to the amount of up to $3 billion led Congress in that year to rescind MCOOL status for beef and pork products, with USDA finalizing that rule in early 2016. 2016. Since that time, those products have received a voluntary Product of USA label. Yet the Secretary says the definition prior to the proposed rule clarification is that
all that was required was that it be processed,
meaning that meat animals could be born, raised, or slaughtered in another country, but if processed in our nation, could receive a Product of USA label. Consumer confusion, according to Secretary Vilsack, is what led to the proposed rule. Some might question if this label law would also receive a WTO challenge from Canada or Mexico. The Secretary notes a key distinction with Product of USA compared to COOL that would protect it from a legal standpoint. Product of USA is a voluntary label.
There is no legal reason for anyone to question the capacity of a voluntary label to accurately represent what consumers believe it to mean.
That meaning being a meat product was completely produced in the U.S. from birth through the entire supply chain to retail. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Once again, that was the USDA's Rod Bain reporting on the latest efforts in meat and poultry labeling in the United States. Still to come on Agriculture today is K-State beef reproductive specialist Sandy Johnson. She joins us to discuss preparing for artificial insemination this season by providing tips on checking equipment, providing good nutrition to cows and heifers, and making sure you have a plan for your team that is going to be helping with this. We'll be joined later on in the show also by Gregg Eyestone. He is a K-State Research and Extension horticulture agent for Riley County. He ends today's show by explaining the importance of the timing of application for crabgrass preventers, especially because they can lose their effectiveness late in the growing season. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we're joined now by K-State beef reproductive specialist Sandy Johnson. She's joining us again today to share some information and some reminders as we come up on AI season here soon, depending on when you're breeding and things of that nature. But Sandy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Well, it's great to have you as always, and thankful for your insight that you're going to provide because, like I said, today we're talking about preparing for AI season. There's a lot that goes into this process.
Right. As we prepare for the AI process, the first thing I want to think about and talk about really is making sure we have our nutrition right, because we want to have a good experience. And if the cows aren't ready to breed or the heifers are not big enough, we're going to be disappointed. So when we think about cow nutrition, really, we set the stage for that for the condition she was at calving. And we want her to reach her peak of milk production and essentially be in a positive energy balance going into the breeding season. And hopefully the forage and other ration resources you have in front of her will allow her to do that. But, we just can't emphasize enough the importance of nutrition. And in saying that, don't believe that when I'm going to say obese animals, body condition score 7 or above, that's not necessarily better, okay? We can see reduced performance in really fat heifers or cows. So we want our nutrition right on both our cows and heifers, understand how big those heifers need to be prior to breeding based on the genetics and the mature cow size. We have the technology to get them there. You need to be able to track their performance, make sure they've got an adequate weight going into the breeding season.
Absolutely. Yeah. A good reminder that nutrition really is at the foundation of everything that occurs reproductive wise for these animals. So having a good foundation there is a great start.
Right. That's our step one, I guess, as we go into this.
Absolutely. And step 2, I guess, would be, having planned out the labor involved, because this is a labor intensive process and that's not something you want to wait until the last minute to plan for.
Right. If we're going to do an AI program, we can take a couple of different approaches depending on what our labor availability is. And if we have more labor, we may want to do more heat detection. If we need to bring somebody in to help us do the insemination, then being able to schedule that with a fixed timed AI works very well. And as people think about transitioning from, maybe you've been doing heat detection in AI for a number of years on your own and are considering fixed timed AI, just understand that if you haven't bred 50 cows at once, you need to be realistic about what your physical ability to do that is. And, you develop arm strength and ability with lots of repetition. And so just don't overschedule yourself the first time you try fixed timed AI. And even, if you're breeding on heat on some of our synchronization protocols, I'm just doing an AM and PM breeding. If I synchronize enough cows at once, I could really set up more cows than my arm is good for too. So, you need to be realistic. And even if you're 20, you may find your arm gets tired. So, share labor. It's always good if you're breeding a lot of cows to rotate in and out because you get tired unless you're doing 200 head every day. And that's the advantage of going to some of our professional AI technicians is they're really good, they're fast, and their arm will make it because they essentially lift that weight every day and are really good at it. So those are all considerations then as we look at, what protocol we might select is what's our labor availability.
Taking a practical approach to these things, always key. And you mentioned protocol there, and that's really, I guess, one of the number one things you really need to sort out in your mind as a producer is what protocol option are you going with? Because there's so many options out there today.
There are a lot of options, and the group that I work with, the Beef Reproductive Task Force, has tried to create a short list of protocols because, as I often tell people, I could spend days telling you what doesn't work. But this short list is going to guide you to things that do work, and a lot of people use them very successfully. And so as we look at, say, choosing between those protocols in a particular category, a lot of it really is maybe the length of the protocol and how it fits your situation. Everybody wants to know what the best one is. Well, it depends, all right? And there's not just one best protocol. So you need to look at the whole picture. If you select something within those groups of protocols that we offer, you'll be fine. They work very well if your cows are ready and you apply it correctly.
Absolutely. That's the caveat there with some of those is if you apply it correctly, because the timeline of some of these protocols, they're pretty strict, and that's something to consider.
Right. We've developed a tool because we want you to do certain things on certain days. And as we get right to that point of fixed timed AI, the interval between when we do the fixed timed AI and that last step, which is usually a prostaglandin injection, we've worked hard on trying to find those optimum time periods. And so this tool that we have, the estrus synchronization planner, essentially allows you to say, all right, if you want to breed at 8 o'clock in the morning with this particular protocol, then it's going to step back and say, well, that means you're going to do this, this, and this on these days. And make sure that you want to breed at 8 a.m. in the morning, say, well, for the protocol you selected, then you're going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in order to pull cedars or something. All right, well, I've had these calls, right? Can I change that? Well, you can. You may not like the outcome. You can change it. But the idea is to put that on a calendar, see if that works, make sure it's not like on mom's birthday and you promise to do something, or can you get everybody there that you need? And usually when we're doing some of these protocols, it takes some extra hands and having that help organize, having everybody on the same page. The synchronization planner is just an excellent tool to do that because you can print out a calendar, look at it together and say, does this work or does this not work? And then help you implement it. So really recommend that people look for that, and you can go to our beefrepro.org website to find those resources and make sure to apply the protocols correctly. Right product, right day, right time.
That tool that you mentioned, incredibly helpful, like you said, especially if you're prioritizing, you want to sleep in a little bit more, or, you're an early riser and you'd rather get it done before it gets hot, per se, in the afternoon. So, yeah, knowing your goals and kind of the key things that you want to actually achieve, key here in this situation.
And it'll allow you to, compare costs and other things with it, but right thing, right day, right amount, key things.
Absolutely. So I will link to that resource as well, as we always do in the show notes. So you can find that in our show notes on agtoday.net if you are interested in utilizing that tool. And Sandy, I think another missed aspect sometimes when it comes to prepping for AI season, sometimes left to the last minute, unfortunately, in some cases, it's kind of just the equipment necessary to make sure that everything is done successfully and efficiently. So when it comes to some of those key equipment reminders that you remind producers of, what are those?
Well, one, you need to make sure you have all the necessary supplies. I can confess to having headed out with the breeding box, and there were no sleeves left, and that was my fault. Don't be me, okay? Look at what all those supplies are. Get them here and on hand. I don't know if we have any supply issues with gloves or sleeves. I don't think so right now, but no need to wait to order those things. So we need all those disposables. We want to have plenty of needles of the right length and size. We want to have all that equipment clean. If we're using, depending on what type of tool, if it's scissors or a straw cutter, to open those straws, those need to be cleaned or, potentially replaced if they're that old, and keep those clean during the course of the season. It's also a good idea to test the temperature if you use an electronic thaw unit. Make sure that it is reading correctly. And we often assume, it's right, but we should stick a thermometer in there, make sure it's working correctly as well. And again, before we're trying to breed that first cow, because it's not working, we need to have a backup plan. And so those would all be very important. And, the other thing I think about, particularly as we get more quarter cc straws, people using sex semen, those smaller straws are more sensitive to temperature change just because of the number of cells that are exposed on the exterior. And so, as we're removing a straw from the tank, there's a temperature gradient in the top of that tank, and we really need to make sure we're keeping that straw down below the frost line until we're bringing the one out that we're going to use. And if we can top that tank off prior to our breeding, that essentially is going to elevate that frost line as much as possible for your tank, give you just a little more cushion there. But semen handling is very important. And again, particularly as we look at sex semen and these quarter cc straws, that we're handling those with good technique and want to install as many viable cells as we can.
Sandy, I know we've talked through a lot of resources today, but just a reminder for those listeners that are tuning in maybe and are on the go and don't have time to look at their phones right now or whatever they're listening on. Where is the most easy website to access all of this information at? Yeah,
so I could go to beefrepro.org, and we have links to the protocols, the sync planner, lots of different things there that would help people with reproduction in general, but in particular synchronization and AI programs.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be sure to link to that as well, as always, in our show notes. But Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely great to have you. And once again, everyone, that was K-State Beef Reproductive Specialist Sandy Johnson joining us for a conversation on preparing for AI season, what to keep in mind. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. Crabgrass preventers are just that, preventers. With just a few exceptions, crabgrass preventers have no effect on existing crabgrass plants, so they must be applied before germination. K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Riley County, Gregg Eyestone, says the timing of a crabgrass preventer application may determine just how effective it is. Greg, as we think about getting out into the lawn, a lot of people are starting to think about the crabgrass preventer and maybe at this point just keep thinking about it, right?
Yeah, there's lots of products that we can choose from today, and so some of them you do put down a little bit earlier than others, but oftentimes I hear a lot of problems later in the summertime. They're seeing crabgrass, and maybe they put it down a little bit too early and it's worn out, so you may pick your poison on if you want it to control early or later. But there's a lot of products to choose from, so you got to research what you're doing.
And really, it's good for about 60 days or so?
Well, the older products, which are still very effective, do have that kind of longevity, and so you put down maybe 2 applications to get you through the season. Some of the newer products are rated as season-long control, but I think those are the ones that people may put down too early. If they have an irrigation system or it rains a lot, it may peter out before we get to the end of the season and you get some crabgrass showing up. We do have an advantage nowadays of putting down a post-emergent herbicide as well. So if you do have some escapes or something like that, we do have options now to control that in our home lawns.
I probably should have started with this, but what's really the idea behind the crabgrass preventer? How does it work?
Yeah, so basically you're getting an amount of product down that will affect the germination or the young growing crabgrass. And so used to think of you putting down a blanket, and that's still good to get good thorough coverage, but really it's the amount of product that you have in the soil where that root system's starting to grow and comes in contact with that. So you can actually have kind of some holes in your blanket, if you will, out there as long as you have enough concentrated product. And I think that's where that product gets diluted over time, and so there's not enough there to be effective maybe later on in the season.
The application process, do we want to do some mowing first to kind of get the lawn a little lower?
Oh, you can do that just to have a little quicker spring green up, but really you just need to water that product in after you put it on and get that activated. It doesn't happen overnight, so you do want to put it on a little bit before we start to see some crabgrass for most of our products. K-State did some research that maybe we need to wait till maybe May before we put some of these products on, and so I wouldn't get in too much of a rush if you've had issues later on in the season.
The timing here is somewhat important then.
It is. You know, we used to say April 15th as a guide. Of course, our seasons are different year from year. We use a red bud, full bloom as a guide for putting down some of the products. I think we may be able to go a little bit later than that for some of our newer products, specifically one called Dimension. It's the only one that actually does control existing crabgrass that's come up, and it's in the second or third leaf stage. So you can wait to actually see some crabgrass before you use a product like Dimension. All the others need to be effective before you see the germination.
Is this for aesthetics, or is this something that will help prevent crabgrass from spreading throughout the lawn?
It's really for aesthetics because the seeds are everywhere, and so it's just basically for the pride maybe, and we often see more issues along the zones that are harder for our grass to grow, so along the driveway, sidewalks, the curbside, those areas that usually get a little bit hotter and is not as good for at least our tall fescue for growing, and so sometimes you can just kind of spot spray. Always concerned about growing a healthy lawn to start with, and if you have an area that's full of turf, there won't be room for weeds to grow. Crabgrass, we know it germinates at soil temperature 55, so we don't need to put on anything before that. Right now it's probably 42 or so, at least here in our area, and that seed also needs sunlight to germinate. So if there's a canopy over there in the shade, you won't get any crabgrass growing, so the characteristics of crabgrass need to be known and then treat for that as needed.
That's K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Riley County, Gregg Eyestone, with information on successfully applying crabgrass preventers. Additional information can be found at county and district extension offices. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.